You're at the Coaching Inn, 3D Coaching's virtual pub, where we enjoy conversations with people who are engaged in the world of coaching.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Coaching Inn. I'm your host, Claire Pedrick, and today I'm in conversation with Aiko Bethea, who I stalked on LinkedIn and absolutely loved what she said about privilege on a comment on somebody else's post, and immediately jumped into direct messages and said, I'd love you to come to the Coaching Inn podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Claire.
And I don't know about you, but I like it when people come into my direct messages who are real.
It all depends. And my team looks at them a lot, so it helps because sometimes you can go down a rabbit hole. So,
Indeed you can. So, Aiko, welcome from Atlanta, Georgia.
yes.
Tell us a bit about your coaching journey and then we'll dive into privilege.
For my coaching journey, I had the privilege actually of having an amazing coach later in my career, and who I'm actually great friends with now. And it was my first time being introduced to having a coach, or even that these people existed who supported folks in their walk in professions or other things. And one of the things that I learned as I started exploring it more was, wow, this is something I think I would love to do for people. And I also noticed as I explored the industry more that there were not a lot of coaches who looked like me, who were executive coaches or leadership coaches. I had noticed the cost it is to become a coach in terms of being certified, and that adds a large degree of legitimacy. And I also recognized that the industry was kind of like the Wild Wild West. It was like everybody was a coach, and I wanted to figure out, how do I become a really good coach? And for me, what does a really good coach mean? And so I did go through Hudson Institute of Coaching in Santa Barbara, where I'm now a faculty member. And what struck me was how much internal growth I experienced in going through the process. And even being a faculty member there now, recognizing how it is hard, especially in these times. I know you're in the UK and I'm in the US, but you all have had your own bouts with a lot of the polarities that are happening as well. And people, it's really difficult to find people who are self-regulated and who are self-aware. And I found that coaches, at least coaches I engage with, and definitely the approach that Hudson has invited me into a community of people where we hold each other accountable. We're transparent. We work to hold our own grounding, and we work to do that for other people. And that is something that is rare.
Yeah.
And so I value it even more now. And I absolutely value being able to provide that space for other people.
Wow.
And if in terms of where I am now and today, not only that love for coaching, but I have a coaching firm, Rare Coaching and Consulting, and we have a bench of about 30 certified executive coaches, and we provide that to others. And the critical mass of our my bench of coaches are identified as people of color, mainly Black and brown. And you also being in this field know that that is not common.
Yeah. Yeah. I've just come out of a conversation on LinkedIn which picks up what you said there about elite, about how elite the coaching profession can become, and how white.
Mm-hmm.
And how that's confusing and creates its own narrative. And I wish I could remember the post that you posted on. I think it was from Elaine Lynn Herring. I think you were.
She's a good friend of mine.
Oh, is she?
Brilliant and a good friend of mine, yes.
So she's already been a guest on the podcast.
She's been, yes. And I'm sure it was a wonderful conversation.
It was an amazing conversation. And we began to talk a little bit about difference and what we bring to the table. And it was absolutely fascinating. So I'm really interested in where are you working with your coaching bench? What kind of organizations are coming to you?
So our business model is mainly B2B. So usually organizations come to us to work with their teams or leaders or just folks inside their organization. And there's a range from global nonprofits to organizations, business organizations to academia, well-known universities as well. And because we understand the barrier to costs for a service like executive coaching, we provide sliding scales. By working with large corporations, it allows us to provide coaching at a more affordable rate for clients. We also offer group coaching where we have a range of different types of cohorts that might be in a group. They might be people who are working just on specific issues. They might be cohorts that are comprised only of women, cohorts that are comprised of people who identify as queer, as folks of color, women of color. So different things, because our goal is often to make sure that we're creating a container where people can um, see themselves and also speak very candidly of themselves without having to do a lot of work of justifying who they are. And instead, kind of get right into the space of trust, connection, and being able to be there, get what they're there for, which is growth and self awareness. And oftentimes, I would frankly say connection and community.
Yeah.
And in our professional lives, it can be very frequent for many people to find themselves as being very isolated, and isolated based on a range of things, but often identity. You're the only woman. You're the only person who's queer. You're the first generation. You're the only Black person. You're the only this, all these things, which adds navigating in a space of where you want to have success or that funds your well-being, your family's well-being. There are a lot of different variables to manage. So we try to shift the container, and I don't even mean to shrink it, but to make it more expansive so that you're not locked into always thinking about just these same things. And it is incredible the degree of validation that people get. And what we've also seen in having a bench mainly comprised of folks of color is that our clients, now it's interesting that most of our clients, especially one-on-one clients, they are white, they are executives, they are very successful. And what we've learned though is that the intimacy in the coaching alliance, where they're working with somebody who is not only an expert in what they do as an executive coach, but they're walking alongside them like their questmate. And this is the first time they've been in this degree of proximity with somebody of such a different race and exposure to life and vantage point of life, and they build a relationship of trust. And sometimes it can be a first time in terms of relationship of trust in a workplace where there's intimacy, you're confiding, you're, as you know, in a coaching relationship, the client is often, their self-exploration can lead to things that it is the first time they've said something out loud, the first time that they've noticed something about themselves, the first time they've noticed something about their ecosystem. And so the coaching relationship is extremely vulnerable. And when you are taking that journey there and with somebody who is so different from you and they're holding you with care, they're also creating spaces of accountability, and they're asking you questions that you never explored, not just because they're amazing coaches, but their lens on life looks different. So the question can be so expansive because you never even thought of what that response would be, because that question would have never been asked of you, especially if you're in a homogenous space or you're in a space where respectability politics rule the day. So everything's you can't say, where you're in a space where professionalism looks a certain way and it can be a gatekeeping tool of itself. And so I'm very proud of being able to create pathways for people to see themselves differently, where oftentimes our amazing coaches are their mirror in a different way. And they are having a new experience. And what we hear by and by from our clients is these markers that show us their emotional intelligence has just elevated because they're in this different space that's different for them, not just in coaching, but in proximity to people who are very different from them, who are showing them care and nurturing. And I'm very proud of that. And that's what we want to bring into the space. And there's the other part of it where folks see an executive coach and leader who has scaled different ranges throughout their own professional career, and they look like them. And it's the first time somebody is not saying, "Are you sure that's what you mean?" Or questioning them about their perspective, but trusting that they know who they are, the client knows who they are. And as you know, part of our baseline as coaches is to have unconditional positive regard for the client and to believe that your client is resourceful. And when you are in a space where you're talking about your profession, it's the first time that somebody who looks like you is across the seat from you and holding the space and is trusting you to know yourself. It's amazing. And it's an unlock.
And I love that you're talking in the same way about it's great to be with someone who looks like you. And it's also great that we can provide coaches that don't look like you outside the echo chamber.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I will just say, send an ode to the people who are clients who courageously and boldly or curiously or just looking at skills say, I want that coach. And it's a coach who doesn't look like me and may have a different perspective. And I'm not afraid of it and I'm welcoming it. Or I don't even notice it because I'm just looking for the best coach for me. And the gift of that is, I think, one that's priceless.
Yeah. So many ways to go here.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested. You talked about sliding scales because
Mm-hmm.
we also do that. So we
Mm-hmm.
charge a lot in order to charge a little. Because I think that matters a lot. And I find in the industry that there's a huge, also a very loud voice that goes, my fee is my fee. This is what I'm worth. This is what I'm going to charge.
Mm-hmm.
And how challenging it can be to have a different voice that goes, actually, not everybody can afford that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to make this thing affordable to them, then we have to have a sliding scale.
Mm-hmm.
And other things need to be available. I might tag you in the conversation that's going on at the moment because I think you'd be quite interested. Yeah, fascinating. Really fascinating. And something about vulnerability in what you've said. I've just I've just found out that I'm neurodivergent
Mm-hmm.
at exactly the same time as I was starting a supervision group for neurodivergent coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that I created safe spaces,
Mm-hmm.
safe enough spaces, until I started this supervision group for neurodivergent coaches who found that they were with people who were different from them but were like them. And the level of safety is completely different than anything I've experienced in any group before. Fascinating, really fascinating stuff.
What do you notice as being different?
Safer. Much more openness to be vulnerable and honest and say what's really going on. You know, you never know. We know that people are still not saying everything, but they're saying more. Willingness to hold each other in a different way. Yeah, much more disclosure, much more really positive, creative holding, supporting of other people's stories. More tolerance of difference, actually.
In other spaces that you were in, what demonstrated that there was less of a tolerance for difference?
I don't think you notice that there's less tolerance for difference until you see when there's more tolerance for difference. Because I think there's a blindness, isn't there?
One of the things that you named in the space that has more folks who are neurodivergent in it is that you're willing to hold each other differently.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I think it looks like flexibility, and it looks like honesty, and it looks like acceptance. Yeah.
What is the flexibility? Wondering.
I'm laughing at you, turning the tables on me. That's okay. It's good. So the flexibility is something about recognizing the need to adapt and to be and to change how we are in relation to how we are with other people.
So what is something that somebody's doing in the group that's showing you that they're being flexible to maybe meet your needs or the needs of others in the group?
Taking breaks, for example. Lots of breaks, more than you'd, an unusual number of breaks. Watching how people respond and adapting based on what you're seeing. So a variation in timing. It's interesting, isn't it? Because often when I do coaching demos, people will say to me, I wouldn't have liked it if you'd coached me like that. And I say, well, I wouldn't have, because we would have worked out together how we were going to do the thing. So if I was coaching you, it would look completely different from if I'm coaching them, because we're adapting and we're changing and we're morphing all the time. So all sorts of nuances, I think, in the way that we show up in the room really make a difference.
And I walk through that because I think it's so important that when we get a sense of something that is working, that's different, that's a bright spot, that's this offering. I mean, you named it as it being safer. And these words always mean different things to people when you say safer, more this, more that, which is why I asked you about what are they doing?
Yeah.
So you being able to stop and slow down and say, what's behavior I notice? It's this, that, and the other. People being flexible in terms of the way they engage or willing to do something different. Wow. One of the things, our practices I notice that we do is that we have lots of breaks. Listening, listening differently. All of the things that you named are things that would elevate any other space as well. Listening, looking at what people need, or being intentional about it so that you can provide that support or be attuned to it and be responsive. Taking breaks instead of making people power through. So we know that spaciousness allows people to think better and to be more regulated. And it's this thing that about wanting, for me, I want people to be able to, one, ask for what they need. And the only way they can do that is if they can pause to figure out what was working for me. So they can now say, hey, it would be great if I had more breaks than this. So one, for people to ask for what they need, and for other folks to understand, yeah, everybody needs something different, and that's normal. It doesn't mean this group of people just need something different, because even amongst that group, there's divergence. And even though we might say neurodivergent, we know that within the title of neurodivergent, there's like 6,000 different ways of being divergent. I can be dyslexic, you can be ADHD, ADD, more in terms of verbal processing, more all sorts of things. So it's not like we're all the same in this neurodivergent space. Same,
Absolutely.
we're all women. Such difference.
Yes.
And so I like when we're able to honor what the homogeneity is as well as what the difference is, because we are all people who have different needs. But how willing are we going to be to create a space where we're holding ourselves accountable to support other people and be responsive and learn what they need, to listen and give space? And how accountable are we going to be to ask for what we need? And all of it is a game of flexibility and variables and pause points and leaning in. And we've somehow lost that as humans in being willing to provide that to each other, or just knowing that we should provide that to each other, or knowing that we require it for ourselves. So I love the way that you're able to paint why that container is different. For all the reasons that we need those same behaviors in all these other spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said one of the triggers for me is about privilege is when I don't recognize that I've got it. Or when I'm in a space where I recognize that it's not being held and it's being thrown around.
That the space is being thrown around?
The privilege is being thrown around. And not being acknowledged that there is actually some level of power here or not power here. You're laughing.
I'm writing about something now, and I just think it's so interesting that you named that, because it centers a lot of that. And just to go back, I want to say that you name that paradox of not recognizing when I do have privilege, but then being in spaces where people are throwing it around, so perhaps they don't recognize it either. I mean, they could be willingly, have willing disregard, but you're seeing it on one end and saying, "Whoa, I know I might do that at moments too."
Yeah. So what are you writing?
So I'm actually writing this a book. It comes out in January, and it's about people anchoring into their values. So anchored, aligned, and accountable, and holding ourselves and others in our spaces accountable for the impacts that we have, etc. But the idea that in different spaces, people don't claim and name what their power is, power, privilege. They may not be aware of it. And there are spaces, most spaces gatekeep, so that power isn't named, and we can go about it as if it doesn't exist, and it's always playing out in a room.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of my, I've written about it in a couple of books. And the whole thing that I might think I'm not taking power, and I might not be, but if you gave it to me, then I've got it.
Right. And it's not even that if an individual gave it to you.
Yeah, it's if life gave it to me.
Yeah, if I just have it. But also if systems give it to you. Yeah. So recognizing and naming systems as well. And also the idea that power itself is not a bad thing. And we somehow got into the space where you're supposed to be ashamed or embarrassed that you have power or that you have privilege. Really, the thing about it is the impact you have on other people because of it, in terms of what you're doing, your acts or omissions around it, and maybe the harm that could be presented.
Yeah.
And everybody has some degree or some way of power within some ecosystem in different ways. Whether you're in a territory or country or place where you speak the first language. Yeah. You speak the language that's there. Or you are of that faith, the majority faith. Or that you're able-bodied. Or you're, even if you're disabled or have a disability, it's not apparent to others. There's so many ways that everybody has it. And of course, context is important. But there should not be shame in owning and holding ourselves accountable and naming it, because that's how you're going to have true connection, is having a true recognition of who you are, how you're showing up, and how you engage with people, and how people engage with you, how people perceive you. So I can be really clear about, this is who I actually am. I know I may present like this, but I also want to add these other aspects about me. So when you're saying you're in a neurodivergent community, I wouldn't know that. But you're naming that and claiming, say, hey, this is part of who I am now. It's like I even get a little bit more of a proximity to you, like in understanding who you are. So all these things were, until we have the space to be able to name them as they are, versus in judgment or fear, or getting credit for masking or hiding. The more we're able to, I think, have connection with not only ourselves, but with each other.
Yeah. So you're talking, it makes me think about status as well as privilege.
Mm-hmm.
My first line manager in the UK was a Quaker, and they call people by their name. They don't call people by their title. So you can't tell by somebody's name what status they have, although sometimes you can by the kind of name they have. But and he gave me this. As we're talking, I'm thinking a lot about it, about power. He worked in Ghana, and he brought this back. Barack Obama apparently had this on his desk.
Who has that on their desk?
Barack Obama had it on his desk.
Oh, Barack. Yeah.
This isn't his. This is my line manager's. And the proverb says, power is like an egg. If you hold on to it too tightly, it breaks. But if you don't hold on to it tightly enough, it falls and it breaks. Isn't that beautiful?
It is. And I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm sure I will be recycling it, because I'm doing a lot talking about power in different spaces and context. Yeah.
And I wrote about it in a book, which he then read, and he contacted me through LinkedIn, I think, and said, what's your address? And I told him my address, and it arrived in a box. And he said, this, I might cry actually. He said, this has done its good work for me. I'm gifting it to you. Use it well.
How absolutely kind.
So now I'm gifting it to you.
That is so generous, though, that they, we have so many downhill spirals about social media, but there are also these lovely connections. And I've learned a lot about a range of perspectives just by being on social media and seeing how different people process information, what it means to them, how it lands on them, and just constantly being a student of, wow, okay, I see that. I would have never guessed that. I wonder why that is. So I have so much appreciation of different parts of what social media offers. And that's such a lovely example of a connection made and insight shared and generosity received. Very nice.
And we can get to know people who are different, can't we?
Yeah.
And that's also a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Hey, so I saw that you do work in the clergy.
Yeah.
I'm really interested and curious about, how is that different from work outside of a religious context? What have you noticed is different?
I don't do it anymore. As an organisation, we do, colleagues do. I think it's much more the same than you'd think.
Okay. People are people, right?
Yeah, people are people. Privilege is privilege. Status is status. Actually, it just turns up slightly differently. We train a lot of ministers to use a coaching style in their work.
Nice.
And that's an interesting thing. Some people absolutely love it, and some people don't. Because, of course, often ministers are given power by people that they haven't necessarily taken, But once you've been given it, you've got it. It's like when somebody becomes any kind of a leader, if people are giving them the power, they've got it, haven't they? Even if they chose not to take it, they're still holding something that's been given to them.
And there's so many power systems and signposts in the religious sectors and systems. So many.
Yes, absolutely. Probably. And I don't know, is it more visible?
I think it depends on a lot of things. If you're already a part of it and on the inside circle, I would say maybe it becomes less visible or obvious to you. But also, I guess it also depends on what part of the structure you're in or how it impacts you. When you're on the outside, it's always easier to see what's different from you or to be critical sometimes. And just the fact that you're talking about faith and religion, there's already quite a taboo about criticism, especially when you're on the inside.
And it kind of loops right back to what you said at the beginning about people being coached by people who are different from them. Because sometimes in the church, people will choose to be, if they're going to work with a coach or a mentor, they'll choose to work with somebody who is like them. But equally, somebody who is different from them will bring a different perspective.
That's right. That's right.
When I was doing a lot of work in the church, I chose a coaching supervisor who had absolutely nothing to do with it. For that reason, that there were lots of differences in how we approached life. And that was why I chose to work with them, because I wanted somebody who would challenge me,
And
ask questions through a different lens.
Did you find it to be a more expansive experience?
Yeah.
Nice. That's where we started this conversation.
Exactly, because otherwise we're colluding, aren't we?
We can. It's easier to get there in terms of collusion for sure. I don't think it's necessarily a given, but it can certainly be easier to fall into it.
Yeah. And I love working with diverse groups where people are able to talk about their stuff without any assumption that other people in the group are the same as them.
Which, frankly, no matter how homogenous a group it might seem or be labeled or be presented as, everybody in the group, when we use that word diverse, everybody is different from each other. There absolutely is. And for us to have space to give people to be expansive and to self-define and to experience even some of our same markers differently is important, because we all have very different inner landscapes. We have different ways in which we engage with the world. And it allows all of us, I think, to have a different degree of agency and permission to shift, to change, to stay the same, if there is not already an expected and anticipated way of how you should be.
Yeah. And we have different family systems, different ways we were brought up, different, everything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. But we give such little grace to ourselves and to others to have and exercise that agency.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think in that freedom of having agency about how my inner landscape is different, how I show up in the world, there is a way to also honor what we know to exist and to be, which are things like systems.
Yeah.
So for someone to say, society, this X whatever society is very patriarchal, and they can show all the data about why being born cis male comes with a lot of privileges, etc., and they can, by data points. And instead of somebody dismissing that and saying, no, that can't be true, blah, blah, but honoring, I see how the system can operate like that. I see that. I see how it may have even ingratiated me. And I can see how that impact can be on different people. And my goal would be to have less harm towards others, to not be a part of inflicting that harm. So what I'm going to do is X, Y, and Z. I don't need to deny, my gender. I don't need to be ashamed of it. Now I have this degree of intentionality that I see something that I may not have experienced like other people, but I see the impact. And therefore now I'm in a space to have even more agency because of my self-awareness, my awareness of a system, not awareness of what I would necessarily do to harm people. And now I can show up and do something different or more intentionally to have the impact I want. And also to not have an undesired impact. And that's become such a maze for people to wrap their hearts and their arms around. And instead, I'm going to double down and head in the sand, no way, no how. And double down versus I even want to honor more about, even if I don't see that, this is how somebody else is experiencing it. The question I always ask myself when someone tells me something really new or it has activated me in some way, I might say, but what if what Claire is saying is true? What would that mean? So I just challenge myself, what if what she's saying is true? What would that mean?
Mm.
In terms of my impact on her or something I could possibly be missing? What if it's true? So somebody's sharing me their experience or what they've witnessed. We have this instinct when we're activated, or if we've told a story about what it means to us, or if it was quite frankly an impact someone has had and they're telling us, instead of us leaning in and digging in and saying, no way, no, blah, 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 all the, not me. Like, I want to be a little bit of arm's length there and just say, what if it's true? Talk about opening the door in a which way book to see all the other possibilities and even to see somebody differently and to invite myself to have even better understanding of myself and how people might experience me. Why would I give that up? Well, I know I would give it up.
Mm.
Grief, embarrassment, shame, mental and emotional exhaustion to walk through that door and consider those options. All fair, but also can be limiting and have a different cost. So we always do the math about the cost of, oh my gosh, if I do that, then what? But we rarely do the cost of, what if I don't open that door? That's a whole different type of cost.
Mm. What if that were true?
You have to learn different math. Yeah.
Well, Aiko, what an amazing conversation we've had. Thank you so much for coming to the Coaching In. When's your book out? What's it going to be called?
The book is out January 2026. It's a Penguin Random House book. And it will be called Anchored, Aligned, and Accountable: How to Transcend the Bullshit to Live the Life You Want. But I'm excited about it coming out. I hope that people will laugh and maybe gain some insights, even if they're criticisms. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
It's like birthing a baby.
That's what everyone says. And I feel like because maybe it's not there yet. I haven't fully embraced the metaphor yet. I mean, definitely tough on some days and not on others. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll pop that in the show notes. And when it gets to January 26th, we'll update the link so people can go buy it.
Okay. Thank you again, Claire, for having me.
Well, thank you for coming to the Coaching In, and thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we'd love you to share the podcast with a friend or leave a comment on social media. And if you'd like to become a regular at the Coaching In, you can subscribe on Podbean and all major podcast channels. We look forward to welcoming you next time. You've been listening to The Coaching In, 3D Coaching's virtual pub. For more information, check out 3dcoaching.com.